This podcast has been edited solely due to confidentiality purposes. The remainder of the podcast is unedited. Okay, well, we're live. For those of you who have no idea what we're doing, I had this idea to sit down with some people that had either differing opinions or sometimes even similar opinions to discuss things in the real world today, because it seems like just about any interview that you hear with really anybody is it's either going to be some type of celebrity or somebody that has some sort of, some sort of public status, or B, you get 10 interviews and they're all people that have the same opinion, or don't necessarily have different fields of expertise. So I'd like to just kind of for us to discuss some things to see where we agree, maybe where we disagree, not necessarily trying to change each other's minds or anything like that, but to literally sit down and reason with one another and to show people that the conversations that we should be having and that we're not having is what's causing a lot of tension in today's society. So, my first guest, and really was the first guy that I thought of whenever I thought about doing this, is my friend David House. David is a good man. He we know each other through our martial arts school. We immediately, he's just one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. But so David, just tell anybody that will be watching or is interested in listening just a little bit about yourself.
Oh gosh, I'm just a man of the world. Let me tell you, Don. From the from the metropolis of Good Hope, I've been in Coleman basically all my life. I'm a teacher at Wallace for a while. I ran a mental health center. I've taken martial arts. I've done a little bit of everything to try to further my knowledge of the real world, which I don't know if it's really helped that much. I feel that the best way to learn is to talk, and to everybody agrees with you, then you're either doing something wrong or around the wrong people sometimes.
Right. So one of the first things I kind of wanted to talk about as far as in your field of work, like how has the coronavirus or COVID-19, how has it affected you and your profession?
Well, it's definitely boomed in terms of people are anxious. They hear one thing on TV from the president or from the governor or just friends, or they in their little circle of group that's so verbal about, oh, this is all a big hoax. This is just a reason. It's going to go away after the election. So, you got that group, but you got the ones that are really nervous. They've got a parent today. They're going to wisely, I feel, going to do the first few weeks, schooling via online learning, taking a chance with your health. I saw where an 81 Jack Nicholson, him and his wife, they were fine. And then a 31-year-old athlete that makes me and you look like old people, hospital ventilator for weeks. So it's scary for me, to be honest. It doesn't bother me, but I've got to remember, age will catch up with you. And even if you feel fine, that doesn't mean everything's exactly running perfect. And so I don't want to accidentally get something and give it to my son or my mom, or something happen. And there you go. You can spread it easily without knowing, because people think that temperature is the main way, but that's just a small part of it. Actually, the biggest thing to notice is if food starts tasteless. Believe it or not, that's one of the is things start becoming tasteless. And little kids, they're not gonna say anything, and before you know it, you've got kids that have it and they're feeling fine except a little fever, and then pretty soon parents feeling horrible, and then it spreads more. But as far as my business and a lot of stuff online, like we're talking now, they want reassurances. They've got anxiety, and to be honest, you can only say so much, because you can't control what other people do. You can't make people minds. You can't make people just stay inside. People get tired of it. We're not wired that way to stay inside all the time.
Right. Well, on that same like kind of train of thought, how do you feel about how do you feel about, like, you know, I know people are wanting, like, for instance, sports teams, you know, people are like, well, we need something to kind of keep our minds off of everything that's going on or whatever. So we're going to do what we can to, like with the NBA, how they've made their NBA bubble out there at Disney and stuff, or, you know, the baseball players have made it to where, or the MLB has made it to where, you know, they don't have people actually in the stadiums. Do you think that that's going to be beneficial, or do you think it's not really going to do any good? Or
I think they're extremely lucky that, you know, it couldn't be a matter of time before everybody and their mama, you know, just look at it this way. I think a couple of baseball teams, most of their starters caught the virus, and they put their next group in. The coach even said that he didn't even know most of the people, and they're number one right now, right? You know, winning all these games. But you know, we got the problem with we've got nothing. That's why football, especially college football, is so popular. But without the stands, without the cheering, growing up, my kids were young. My daughter's 26 now. My son's 22. Wrestling a lot. And you know, the fun part of it was the yelling, the screaming, the grandiose behaviors, you name it. But I've watched it just for the heck of it a few times. They don't have fans. Right. They don't have people. Same. It's going to be the same with some of these sports, but we really need something to take our mind off of it. Yeah. There's only so many movies you can watch. There's only so many video games or novels you can read. We have a garden to mess around in the garden, but you start thinking, oh my gosh, is this the way we're going to be getting food soon if we don't watch out, just in the garden? So right. It is stressful.
But like with watching the MLB games, which I haven't really watched, I've just seen clips of it where they have the cardboard cutouts of people, you know, and I started laughing. I was like,
I saw that. I thought it was on my eyes.
And then you know, they have cardboard cutouts of fans. And apparently they pay a premium to have a cardboard cutout of themselves back there. And then there was one where it was like somebody paid to have a cardboard cutout of their dog, you know, and then like the dog gets hit with the baseball and they're like, yeah, you can buy this. I was like, man, they're chasing that revenue hard. You know?
And I worry about how, I mean, not how many people can go to a game, but the little things that they're not being able to do is also a big, I mean, I don't know if you've thought about this, but just think it's August. Next month in Coleman is the fair. I guarantee you're not going to have the fair.
Right.
And, you know, some of this revest. I mean, it's things that people showcase their talents and their wares and make some extra money. It's just, I feel for them. Right. And so when I see these sports, like not just college football, but high school football, all their money for the band or for building projects and things like that, and they just can't do it. It's and you want to think, well, you hear it's just like the flu, or it's just like this, or just like that. But you know, it's something. These other diseases, as far as what it can do to you, and the lasting effects after you quote unquote feel better or right. cured. So yeah, I get off topic. I apologize.
No.
You know, it's one of those things where I agree with me, disagree with me. The virus could care less.
Right.
But you know, in some of these places that, you know, they're wanting people to come in and eat their restaurant, and they're trying to keep, you know, hey, we'll take anybody almost, but you know, but there's people that want to go there too, that want to stay healthy. So you know, what do you do? It's really hard.
Well, how do you feel about some, like the protests, right? Like the people that are culminating in these protests, because you'll have some people that are very cautious. And even some governors, right, that are saying that are wanting to place restrictions. And I want to make sure I phrase that carefully, because you and I both know, like the what do they call it now? The ordinances, or whatever they want to call it, the guidelines are not actual laws, but it's just like, hey, we're telling you to do this. Just please use some common sense or whatever. But then certain governors, regardless of political affiliation, are saying, okay, well, you know, we don't think it's safe for you guys to congregate in like a music venue, right? Because we have some friends that are musicians. Like, that's extremely unsafe. But you guys can culminate out here down Main Street and protest when you're, you know, shoulder to shoulder. Like, do you think there should be do you think they should make provisions for that, or should there be, do you think maybe they should just cut that out at least until a while, or what do you think?
Well, I won't say it's apple and oranges. It's like herding cattle versus herding cats. In theory, you can herd both if you're good enough. When you got the tame, the venues, like I was going to go see my wife, I go see Matchbox 20 at over at Oak Mountain. They canceled it.
Right.
And it's pretty orderly. Yeah, of course you want to go, but it's orderly people. But then you've got protests, and that's the backbone of being an American.
Right.
My daughter went to the one in Huntsville, and
right.
And I think it's and of course she had a mask, and there's going to be, unfortunately, with every have a core group that's pretty radical, one way or another, and it's going to drive it sometimes to the extreme. And I do think there need to be law and order. If they don't follow the ordinance of how to protest, ramifications about that. I do think any gathering is going to be dangerous, but there's only so much you can regulate,
right.
compared to a sports venue or a music venue, or I saw that. What is the name of it in Sturgis? The big bike rally.
Yeah.
There used to be a show on called what it was. Anyway, it was about one of the saloons, and they were showing how they're taking the wagon wheel things and making giant circles for people to stand 6 foot apart. But it's not going to happen.
Right.
You're not going to do that. But you can only try. But I really think there's only so much that you can do when it comes to something so cool and it's protested. Unfortunately, one side or the other will latch onto that, saying, "Well, look, here's what they're doing. Why don't you get on to them for that?" But you just can't. You just can't tear into people and shoot them, because one be rough with them, but next political cycle, if there's a different president or a different Democrat or Republican or Independent, they're going to be saying just the opposite. Hey, you can't do that. You shouldn't be doing that. So unfortunately, but I do think the law has to be followed within reason.
Right. Well, see, that was part of which I didn't experience this. So you'll probably have more insight on this because your daughter went to the protest up in Huntsville. But, I think they said later in the evening that things started kind of turning south pretty quickly. For anybody that's not watching that doesn't know David or I, in Huntsville, Alabama, it was back, when was that? That was back around May, sometime around
May.
May.
It wasn't a long time ago. I know a couple people from one other person from Triad was there also. We got to watch it. She had it on her Facebook video thing. We got to watch what she was doing, how it was turning sour in a hurry.
Right. So from what I heard and had read, which I don't know, what actually transpired, but their permit, it was for the protest, was set to expire at like 7:00 or something. And then they, the large mass of people decided to either relocate into Big Spring Park or something like that, but it exceeded that permit, that allotted time. And then of course, then I think they were shooting tear gas and all kinds of other stuff into the crowd to get them to disperse. But I don't know for certain. And I think you would probably have some, what actually did transpire?
Well, pretty much what you said is they expired at a certain time, go to a different area. But here's the problem: when you've got any group, and just think that age group that was there. There was a lot of older people, but there's a lot of younger people. And to be honest, this is probably the time of their life. Never been to a protest.
Right.
Felt like being there was the place to be, to let their voice be heard, and that's not the place to take a chance. And people weren't moving fast enough. I do think maybe the trigger was pulled a little bit fast on some of the things. So I think that you can do like lots of the bars. Now, I was watching when we counted 24 state trooper cars coming right in front of where my daughter was, and and instead of them turning around, maybe pushing people back, that's when they just started doing tear gas. In itself, when you give somebody a certain amount of time, but that's where mayors and things like that have to kind of come to grips on, hey, here's what's going on. Is it going to make it worse? Is it going to make it better? Who's really in control of the city? But rules are rules, and I'm not sure exactly what the ordinance said as far as how much time after. It's almost like you have a party at somewhere and they say you got to be going by a certain time. When do you start really getting
Yeah.
fire? Really, turn the lights out on people. I mean, it's a
Right.
crude kind of example, but
Yeah, it's
they give
hard
them
to
plenty of
wind down.
time.
It's definitely hard to wind down it's hard to wind down a group of 100 people, let alone, several thousand, if not tens
They
of
won't
thousands of people.
force that,
So yeah,
but
I definitely understand that. But so like along the same lines, like with the protests of what's currently going on with, if David House was now became governor or became president, or it would have to be even more than that, where you had some sort of like authoritarian,
oh yeah,
if David House now became dictator or whatever, and he could say like, this is what we're going to do to move, at least move in the right direction. Like what would be your suggestion because we know the protests right now have to do with, was it a police's abuse of force or abuse of authority and things like that. So what would you suggest or try to implement, which we know we can do that through our legal system by voting, right? We vote for the people we want in office that will basically vote for laws to be passed that represent our ideals. But if all that was thrown out the window and David House is now the man, like what would you try to implement?
well, a lot of those leaders are so far up the ladder, they don't really understand what's going on down below. The problem is down below, and there's no really set leaders. Just the ones that yell the loudest and do the most whatever are the ones that's going to be leading the crowd. So there's not much, and some of those people are so outrageous on what they want to happen that it's not going to do any good. So you really just can't say we're going to get a group of y'all and talk about how to handle this. I
Right.
really don't like the idea of people moving into an area and tearing up police. The authoritative side would be, the dictator side of me would be, I hate to say it, but I'd probably get the water cannons out. I wouldn't be doing tear gas, but what these people are pushing shanty towns, those would be swept away.
Right.
I mean, you just can't have that. If they want to talk, you can't just say meet at this certain gym and we're going to talk, because you're going to have 3,000 people there and 2,000 want to yell and scream, and the
Right.
newspaper's going to be there. So there's really no easy answer besides you have to have a starting point where it's kind of back to normal. You can't just say, okay, you took it over the spot. It's not like a war where you take over some land and then all of a sudden, okay, we're gonna try to negotiate.
Right.
It has to be, you've got to give this back. It's got to get back to normal before we can start getting it back to normal.
Well, look,
you can't just occupy an area.
Looking at, especially when we're talking about the police, like looking at it from mine and yours perspectives, as far as being, jiu-jitsu practitioners, we, when we grapple or when we get in a match with somebody or anything like that, especially if you compete in a tournament, it seems like, you can drill things and like most of the time when somebody's getting ready for a tournament, they work for maybe 8 weeks out, and that's being generous. It's really closer to 6 weeks, and they're trying to drill hard for takedowns and stuff, and working the point system and stuff. But really, in that time, there's not a whole lot of new necessarily technique that they're going to be able to implement, more so than they do, let's polish this up, or whatever. So with saying that, most of it comes back to like muscle memory, right? So for instance, in jiu-jitsu, like this last week, it was the first time I'd had a chance to grapple with somebody of any real caliber in probably over a year. And I was like, man, I'm going to be so rusty. And when I started grappling with him, I was really surprised that not only was I not as rusty as I thought, but I wasn't rusty at all. Like, I mean, I just immediately fell, but I mean, everything just started kind of clicking. It became muscle memory. And the reason I'm saying that is because when you look at some of the training for police officers. You know, there was a story back in the early 90s where there was a bank robber in LA County somewhere, and he busted into the bank anyway. Long story short, he held some hostages. The guy was packing some pretty heavy artillery, and the SWAT team shows up, and one of the police officers is walking towards the bank and gets shot, and he falls to the ground. And you can find the video on YouTube. And he falls in the middle of the road, and he's bleeding out, and he takes his firearm and he holds it straight up in the air. And for the longest time, nobody knew what that was. And then a fellow police officer finally came forward and said, well, that was his training. That training was a sign that he was letting us know that he couldn't help us in battle. That he was out of the fight, and there was nothing he could do, you know. And he said, and they asked that other police officer, well, I mean, this guy's shot in the gut and he's bleeding out in the road. What in the world would make him not want to scream or call for help, but raise his hand with his handgun in the air? And he said, it's hours and hours and hours of meticulous drilling, you know. And like, it seems like in the jiu-jitsu world with us, you know, the techniques that stick with us are the ones that we drill over and over and over and over and become that muscle memory. And I believe that same principle translates to police officer training, you know. So, but at the same time, I do know that there are precincts, there are areas that are in such dire need of law enforcement that the training is, I don't want to say forgotten about, but it's definitely not the first thing they mention. You know, it's not, hey, you know, what kind of credentials do you have? What kind of previous training do you have? Anything like that. It's, hey, would you like a job? You know, and so that does throw up a couple of red flags. Now, I don't know that it's necessarily like that, because I do know there is some training they have to go through, but I definitely think we would agree that the training of law enforcement needs to be more extensive, and the vetting needs to be more extensive.
Two things. You can I like to call it being proactive or reactive. Unfortunately, a lot of the training nowadays is way too reactive, and that means you're one or two steps too slow. You just can't have the people up top be the ones that are proactive out and say, here's how they should handle it, when their training has not got them to the point to where they kind of know, you know, don't want to leave it to the brass to make the decisions, because they're on the ones on the ground. Right. And lots of times, shoot first, you know, anything like that. If anything, they could be the ones not shooting first. And you can see some of the problems they're having lots of times has to do with not just guns, but with physical altercations that lead to severe injury.
Well, so with that being said, I mean, this is obviously a very broad question, but do you think that the law enforcement in this country, especially in very overcrowded cities and things like that, do you think that the men and women that are employed there, do you think most of them are what we would consider, you know, like a good person, a good member of society? Or do you think that sometimes that falls to the wayside, or you know, what? How would you, especially like when you're talking like places like Chicago, Birmingham, you know, New York City, Los Angeles, stuff like that? Do you think that most of them have character?
You just kind of snap. I think that happens a lot in the military and with the police, especially when you've got to have the same experience that you do of being bit so many times, and nobody really, if you do anything wrong, you're videotaped, or you're only videotaped and you're doing the bad thing, or you've got people calling all kinds of ACL, whoever it is, or calling the commissioner complaints, and he's worried about his position, or worrying about his election, or the sergeant worrying about, because now they're getting a bad reputation. You know, all these things are turning people sour to doing a job and being like you used to see back in the 50s and 60s, you know, when people were being nice. I remember my dad used to take tickets, or they would get pulled over, or they would, they just laugh with you and they would break it up and then let you go. It's like, hey, y'all quit that. Nowadays, there's no telling what could happen.
Right.
It's automatically, I won't say guilt. If you don't have a little bit of that mentality, especially when they start inventing or putting dark tint on windows, you can get shot in the face, you can get stabbed, or any number of things.
Well, I think.
So, yeah, I think they're good people. I just think it's.
Yeah, I think we've seen recent, like I'm 30 years old, and we definitely see, in my opinion, I'm seeing more, tension, more dissension, more hate. I mean, just more backbiting and things like that than I've ever seen. I've seen more disrespect for their fellow man, for elders. I mean, it's crazy. It just seems like the moral standards that once were are either being broken completely down or are at least being shifted. And I think at the core of who we are as Americans and human beings is that there has to be a standard, right? It's the same like with the police officers right now, or with the people that we teach in jiu-jitsu and things, right? Is we have to have a standard. There has to be some sort of standard for these men, women, even the kids that come to Triad. We have expectations of them. We expect them to listen to their mom and dad. We expect them to keep their grades up and so on and so forth. And those standards seem to either have been lost somewhere in translation or are shifting. So I guess that leads me to this question. It's like, do you think there are moral standards, or do you think that that there are subjective standards that people are, it's like this. It's like a thief a lot of times will tell you that stealing's wrong unless he wants to steal something, or unless, a kid along the same lines, a small child, you don't, some people have said, well, you don't have to teach a small child that stealing's wrong. Well, I agree with that to an extent. But as you see, if he wants a toy that other little kid has and he takes it, he doesn't feel any kind of guilt. But if
you haven't seen a kid lie to get out of trouble at any age, then you're not been watching.
Right. But not only that, but so that kid, I took that toy because it's mine and that's what I wanted. But if you go up to that same kid and you take his toy, now he feels a sense of injustice, right? So he does have some sort of sense of a moral standard. So do you think that there is like any kind of absolute moral standards, or do you think that they're subjective based on location or the people that you're around?
I think backs up to what we're talking about a minute ago, which we could talk a whole nother hour on this one particular thing. It's like the guitars behind you. They're both look different, and yet they got some of the same characteristics, the same shape. That's how it starts. And the problem is the one thing that's not being that's being said it's being looked at, but not being looked at enough, is mental health. You've got different varying levels of post-traumatic stress disorder. You've got, if we have several officers that train in the various Triad dojos, and to be honest, if they didn't have that outlet, you can't say, well, I'm going to the gun range and that's how I'm going to de-stress. You don't de-stress, you visualize too many things. If you didn't have that chance to let your mind go blank and just, you've been rolling, no matter what's happened that day, if you're focusing on your technique and on grappling, it's all blank. None of that stuff matters. A little bit at night, a little bit upset, and you wake up in the morning feeling better. It's because that tension, our brain is a muscle, and that tension is going to, just like picking up something heavy, and then you let it down, you feel that tension. And just too many officers, too many military is not getting that chance, that tension to just wash away. That's why I know Matt Ward, he had a brilliant idea, I think last year, officers, soldiers, they train for free. that's what's needed. That way to release some of that tension and anxiety, and then that standard is going to be more of a standard throughout the career instead of just that first being made. It's got the strings, it's got the shape, until it's got the different colors put on, the different tuning. And unfortunately, the tuning with officers nowadays is getting to be on the bad side because there's no way to work on the mental health. Standard gets corrupted. Not corrupted is the wrong word. It gets changed easy by just the daily experiences, and you can't just say go talk to the department shrink. That's automatically. I put the biggest thing to be talking about, but we're basically men have shown, okay, now I'm going to let my feelings out a little bit, and pretty soon somebody's either joking or on purpose going to poke fun at them, and then they're going to tighten up that much more. They're not even going to open up. So this is for men and women. So there's got to be that outlet to where that standard stays not just the first 2 months of training, but all throughout their career, and not be affected by mental health. But that's what your experience, how those experiences are addressed in your own head and by your colleagues is how it's going to shape you the next time you have that experience. So yeah, there's a standard, but it gets warped easy.
What do you think? What do you think that standard is? Like, if you could sum it up, like what do you think? What type of standards do you think we should hold? I mean, whether it's police officers, politicians, or even just each other. What kind of standards do you think we should hold each other accountable to?
I thought about this the other night. I'm thinking you could mold, or you could have one little statement to probably could go with all those, from military to police to politicians. And it's something we hear all the time. You see it on the side of the car: to serve and protect. That wraps it up. The officers serve and protect. Not only protect us, but protect themselves. The politicians protecting us and protecting our interests. Same thing with the military. I think that's a great standard, to serve and protect. I'm sure there's some more lines to that saying, but when it comes right down to it, that's what should be going on. That should be the standard. It has nothing to do with hacking, with beating down our rights. With I know good and well they don't like having to go and get their own people that they serve. That's where you get things that you've heard about. All these protesters are just what I'm trying to think what the president calls them sometimes, but just rebel rousers. They're just trying to or whatever they are. That if you put that in your mind, you can easily do some of the things that people do without worrying as much. But that core part in your brain that you learn when you're in school for being an officer, to serve and protect, is still in there. And there's where that mental health issue starts. And pretty soon, the good stuff gets just kind of washed out. And you wonder why these people have high rates of suicide, or quit, or have issues of officer shootings more, or more violence. I want to talk about domestic violence issues, working with all kinds of military and officers. You can imagine how that can affect them. Right. So yeah, I think that core serve and protect standard is always there, but it worked way too easy.
What about like their character? Not even specifically to them, but since we are talking about either police officers or whatever, I mean, it also with them. So for instance, like at Triad Martial Arts, we expect people to uphold a certain standard of conduct outside of the school, right? Like, we expect people to be honest in their dealings. We expect people to do what they say they're going to do. We expect people to treat others with kindness and with fairness and so on and so forth. So on like a very personal, like person by person basis, what kind of moral standards should we expect as citizens that we have these law enforcement or whoever? I mean, even politicians, I mean, you have all the old jokes about, crooked politicians and stuff, which some of them are hilarious, but you have all these old jokes and stuff about these politicians being crooked and about being liars and stuff like that. And people now have just come to terms with the fact it's like, oh, they're a politician and they're a successful politician, which means at some point they lied about something, you know?
Yeah.
So like on a personal level, what do you think what kind of a moral standard, character standard should we hold those people to?
It's funny you should mention that. I'm thinking about, and I think you've seen this movie, but the Roadhouse. You ever seen that with Patrick Swayze, the bouncer?
Yeah.
He says, "You be nice until it's time to not be nice."
Yeah.
The guy's like, "When's that supposed to be?" He says, "I'll tell you." The thing is, people want the officer. We'll just say police officer. I hate to pick on them, but to be nice until it's time to not be nice, and that means when they have a problem. So, I got off subject a little bit, but
Patrick Swayze will do that to you.
You want to, yeah. I'm thinking about his dance in the movie, but that didn't sound right. But it's like you always want this type of police officer that's friendly, and that's gonna. You see on TV occasionally playing basketball like that, but you want somebody that can be. It's based on Josh. It's based on the times. Back when I was younger, you'd want a type of police officer. Now you want somebody that's going to save your family's life. That means kicking the door, guns blazing. Sheehan would probably kill me, but I'll use try it as an example. You've got the kids, and then you've got the regular jiu-jitsu students, karate students. But then you look at, I won't say the elite, the ones that compete, but they carry themselves a little bit different. They have a little bit more responsibility, but they have to prepare for a fight weeks and months in advance. And there's smack talking, and there's this, and there's that, and there's that mental side of it that you're not always going to demonstration of the best martial artists around, because that is not specifically what they're geared for at that time. So if you're wanting to watch your dojo fight, you're got to be, I won't say ruthless, but you this is gonna sound weird, but your people are yelling, tear his head off, rip his arm off.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want a person going in there handing out flowers, and like,
right.
Oh, you did so good, give me an elbow. That's more of the philosophical side of it. So there's the philosophical side of serve and protect, of the military, of the police. Unfortunately, again, that's a broad brush, and you've got certain not going to be that way. And that's the times when you want them to be there when you need them and to handle things. And unfortunately, they handle too many different things. You just handle some kids, then you got to go to a domestic violence situation. And you got a thing where you have to pick up kids for DHR. You just can't slow down those gears in your head fast enough to be able to handle things just right. So unfortunately, I wish there was a great standard, but nobody shoots unless they has to, and then it's problems for days with, should I, shouldn't have. But nowadays it's not those times. You go in, or you're gonna be the one dead. It's just unfortunately 2020 is definitely not 1980 or 1990. I kind of got off your question a little bit, but I just think there's no way that there can be this person's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about going into the academy. There's those are being experienced with things that's happened on the street, and soon you're going to be indoctrinated almost to those things too, to watch out if you want to be alive. They're going to say, take care of your mental health, take care of this. Just easier said than done.
Right. Yeah. I definitely agree. People are, people are complex, and they deal with complex issues all the time.
Even RoboCop wasn't perfect.
That's right. He
might come to that one day. I'm joking, but that might be one of the things one day.
Well, and so I taught karate and jiu-jitsu for like 15 years or something like that. It was a long period of time, and we had those expectations of personal responsibility and accountability.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And we were kind of cut. I think still are. If you talk to Daniel, Daniel's still pretty cut and dry about it. It's, look, I expect.
Oh yeah, it's high standards.
Yes, yeah. He's like, I expect you to conduct yourself in a way that is not just
Mhm.
presentable, but respectable, I mean, and you're to treat your, if you still live at home, you're to treat your parents well. You're to conduct all your dealings with, with integrity.
Yeah.
You're supposed to carry yourself in a way that would make your parents and grandparents and so on proud. And if you don't, then you don't need to be here.
Yeah.
And we've always
Exactly.
stood firm on that. Daniel has, I know Johnny has, I have, John, anybody that's a black belt at the school will tell you the same thing. And, martial arts is big business for some people. And I'm not saying the ones that are making a very successful living at it have caved in any way. But, in Coleman or just in Alabama in general, we just don't have the same population. So we're already at a disadvantage. But even still, you look at a place like Triad Martial Arts in Coleman, Alabama, or in Huntsville, or wherever it may be. You look at a Triad Martial Arts that's got a few hundred students, and we're paying the bills or whatever. Daniel's able to afford to pay some people to help him teach classes and keep the lights on, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And then, but he's still willing to tell somebody if they come in with any kind of malice or any kind
Oh,
of,
yes, of course.
hey, not only am I not going to teach you, but you've got some issues, dude. Daniel has that same compelling urgency to get people to examine themselves as I think just about anybody, and anybody that has taught jiu-jitsu in particular, because like when I taught karate, I taught it to the kids, right? And most of the kids there were there because their parents brought them, and that's fine, but because I could still invest in them, and in the same way in jiu-jitsu, you can do that, but with the adults, I love teaching adults so much more, just because of the fact that the ones that are there because they want to be. They're there because I mean, they've had a rough day at work or whatever, and even through all that, they're showing up. And the jiu-jitsu aspect for me personally was always like the smallest scale of what I wanted to teach somebody. I really wanted to invest in them characteristics and or character in general. You have some people that are just kind of like wandering around in life aimlessly, and they don't really have any aspirations or anything. And when you can see somebody take a principle that you've taught them through jiu-jitsu and apply it in their business or in their family life or something like that, and see them succeed there, that's really when I felt like I had done anything. That was when I was like, okay, what I'm doing has some purpose.
Yeah, the good thing about Triad, a family feeling, but with a school that size, that we can do that. But some of these other schools, I'm afraid a student's more of a commodity.
Right.
It's like, and they have the handbook that says we're working on integrity, loyalty, all this stuff. But that's the one thing. That's why I had my kids take it years. I mean, they took it for years and years and years and years. It's not only to learn to protect yourself, but to learn to be a better person. That's a good thing about Triad. I was just saying, as an example, with just like the police officers, you've got some that still have that integrity. It's just a different side of it shown because of things like that is a different ball game. But still, even with that, you have to go through tons of training and until Daniel says you're ready. And that's not just physically ready, but mentally ready, and to handle those top and basically what you're going to hear from other people, to handle it and not go off
right.
the deep end and be all aggressive and just be something that Triad didn't want you to be.
Well, see, that was
the ones I know all well respected, well behaved. I've talked to them many times.
Right. If you talk to somebody that's a black belt from our school, they're even the ones that don't have the opportunity to train anymore. When they come in, that they carry themselves a certain way. whether it's for show or not, I don't know. But
Yeah.
for the most part, the ones that we know personally, especially the ones that are still really active and involved, we know them on that personal level. And I think it comes back to kind of like what you were saying about with your kids when they were taken, as you said that they were there, yes, to learn self-defense, and to build their character, but to become better people. Right. So the question there that's kind of where my question lies is, so what is a good person though? Like what would we consider a good person? Because I mean, like if you were to ask 10 people, it doesn't matter who it is. It could be the best, most generous person in the world or the lowest of the lowly. If they're a good person, they would say, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm a good guy. So what would what would you consider somebody characteristic wise that would be a good
Well,
person?
again, it's based on their experience and what their version of say being nice is versus what but I think with me it surrounds respect yourself, respect the people around you. It's all about respect. How you treat other people is how you respect other people, whether they agree with you, whether you're training with them and you get tapped, whether you don't, whether it's all about being respectful. And I think that's something they teach there, but I think too many places don't teach that. The serve part, little parentheses for respect in there also, because you can't serve people unless you respect them and respect yourself. But yeah, I think that the one big asterisk would be you have to respect yourself and others.
Right. I agree. Do you think that what do you think that there's validity to that same standard that to me, that I believe was set way back thousands of years ago to be upheld today?
Yeah, the thing is, I watch all kind. I have trouble sleeping sometimes, so I listen to all kinds of podcasts and read and listen to audio. Listen to several on the Bible, the Ten Commandments, and how through the years they've been interpreted and changed, and written by man versus the original, off the mount. I even wonder, you see on some comedy shows where they were 15 and then he dropped them and said 10 commandments. There's just no telling. But I always look at it in that. But you can try to be a godly person. You can try to be a person that makes the right decisions. But we were born to be fallible. And the thing is how we bounce back and how we address that lack of breath all the time that we need to. And I think that just defines the person, whether you're taught that in martial arts or taught that in the academy or just in church. And I'll tell you, in church, it's not always, as well as I do, there's some of the fast one thing and do another.
Right.
It's really kind of what's in your heart. And I really think our heart is our ultimate guide, even if there was no religion, even if there was no preachers. I really feel that there's something in beings that point us in the right direction as far as what's good, what's bad, what's right, and what's wrong. And I feel that's what's been put in there. And I won't say that's kind of the unwritten Bible in my book, is that feeling wrong that you learn. Yes, we lie when we're younger and we do this and we do that, but ultimately no, we shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
And I think it's just as our character builds as we get up, that's what is. I know I'm off topic. That's
no. That's fine.
Kind of, I'm trying to say how to put it. That's the ultimate guide, I feel, is somebody that can admit that they've done something wrong and bounce from it. No, if they do, look at that and see why. And in the commandments, there's many examples of how I'm sure thou shalt not kill. The soldiers have to fight with that all the time, wrestle with that. Police officers, I mean, there's so many times that we just can't walk that straight and narrow. Even in examples in the Bible, from battles to the flood to you name it, there's things that happen that we would say was cruel.
Right.
It's what you learn, right and wrong, and how we teach our kids and how we handle ourselves. And I know it's kind of jumping around everywhere, but
No. That's exactly what I was kind of hitting on, because like that's what for instance our mom taught us for the longest time. She was like, that and I think it's a widely thought statement, I guess, and what you're taught is a good standard to live by, which is like you said, is that in your heart what is right or wrong. And some people say specific to you, or and they can add whatever caveat that they want, I guess, specifically. And for the longest time I believed that, until I really started looking into especially in the scriptures it says, well, the heart is wickedly deceitful, so I was like, well, what does that mean? And I started looking through it and started trying to find some examples, right? And like real current, or at least semi-current examples, because when you look at guys like Hitler, for instance, I know that's a very extreme case, but you look at a guy like Hitler, and in his mind, he was doing what he considered to be, the ultimate work. And there was no remorse for slaughtering Jews. So that's why when somebody says like, that's when somebody tells me like, well, I live life, the moral standard that I use is based on my own version of what I've seen, heard, understand, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, but how's that going to hold up in either a court of law, or how's that going to hold up to another group of people that just disagree with you? Because Hitler had a nation backing him, but the entire world, once they found out the heinous crimes he was doing, knew immediately, like, okay, this guy is committing this horrible atrocity. And but to him, in his mind, he may have even been following the desires of his heart. So so where do we like draw the line? Where can we say, okay, well, we can base it on personal experience, but does that make sense?
I don't think, to be honest, our brain wants to put structure on your dream at night. You're basically your brain's trying to put together a 700-page novel on about 4 pages.
Right.
And that's why it's so crazy. Our mind, we're just designed to want to have black and white, yes and no, and then we start making exceptions when it really is no for sure. I don't think. I know as human beings we think that we can make a black and white, and the 10 Commandments are pretty black and white. You can see they're not always as black and white in the quote unquote real world when you're trying to survive in 2020 versus way back years and years ago. I wish this is a line I would never cross, but when you have a family, when you have things that you hold dear, you would do things. In college you had this class on moral to shall not steal, but what happened? You don't have the money to pay for this particular medicine or this, and that's the only way you can get it is steal it to give it to your son or daughter to have. There's just so many moral quandaries that it's easy to say, well, no, I would never. And there's probably some people that would do no, I never. I know many cases, well, not personally, but on the news, where they would not give their children any medicine once something bad happened. That maybe they have the definition of the line right there that I don't. But in my humble opinion, I just can't think of that line that we can say never should be crossed or has to be that we start from. Besides, trying to be respectful, things like that. It just,
right.
But there's always going to be exceptions to to every rule.
Oh, well, you said something earlier that kind of made me perk up a little bit, as you said that we as humans are designed, fallible, that we're designed to, in a faulty way. So do you think that, and this is I know this is like such a broad discussion, but do you think that we were designed by a creator, or do you think that we were, kind of made happenstance. You know, I'm not necessarily saying, are you, you know, do you believe in the God of the Bible, or do you believe in evolution or the Big Bang Theory? You're like where do you stand on that? Do you think that we were designed, or do you think that we were like fearfully and wonderfully made, or that we just happened to get so lucky that we're here?
You know, lucky we're here, but then that's so many different carbon-based life forms that can do the things they can do. I have no doubt that we're created somehow. I don't know who or what, but then again, one side of me, my brain can't wrap around the idea that something was able to comprehend the throat, the intestines of this and that.
Right.
But then I also feel that it could have been that the things first start out with, like, here's the basic thing, and build from there. But I'm putting some leeway for things to develop as time goes on, no matter what planet, what atmosphere. That's why I think, you know, things explain why. No, I just think situations happen, and if things don't change, things will go extinct. But I do, you know, it's one of those philosophical questions that you hear in college, you know. So I feel like we weren't just, because if something was random things don't always happen again and again. Like if two things, atoms hit each other and made something, they're going to make that something. So, you know, but our sense of time, you know, we've kind of invented that word time.
Right.
You know, when they say God created, you know, 7 days, you know, all that, we put that limit on there, a day. That has nothing to do with 24 hours and 7 days in reality. So, you know, there's trial and error. There's things that work, things that don't work. I just feel that our combination worked. That got replicated. I don't know who replicated it, but whoever did, thank goodness. But I don't think, again, you know, it's hard to pin myself down because I'm, we'll say, dumb enough to know don't know a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm dumb about time and space and how things are created. Our brain just can't wrap around it. We're just can't, like, we're making a computer program, AI, it's going to start. It's so complicated, the human body. I mean, the atoms, the carbon base, the right temperature, the right distance from the sun, all these other sun, you know, then you get into people start talking about flat Earth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We talked about that a little bit.
I do think we were created. I don't know how we were created, but it was replicated. And that means that there was some intelligence behind it somehow.
Right.
I don't know if the intelligence was a quote, but something happened and something created us, and something created more things like us, meaning we breathe air, we walk on 2 feet, or we have to reproduce, we have to eat, you know, things like that. So
yeah, I actually heard a guy that I listened to on a pretty regular basis went to UCLA and was talking to a biology professor there, and he's supposed to be one of the top biologists in the world, I think. And anyway, so he just asked him, he said, do you believe in intelligent design? And he said, he sat there for a second and he was like, what are you trying to trap me? And he said, I'm not trying to trap you. I'm just asking you a question, you know? And he said, well, no, I don't. And he said, well, why don't you? And he said, well, because I've been taught through years of schooling and blah, 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 you know, that obviously that we were created from the start of the very first carbon atom, you know, the Big Bang and blah, blah. He said, well, all I'm asking, do you believe in intelligent design? He said, no. And he said, okay, well then if you don't believe in intelligent design, he said, make me a flower. And the guy looked up at him and he's like, what do you mean? He said, well, make me a flower. Hold your hand out and make me a flower. And he said, oh, I can't do that. And he goes, well, if a flower isn't intelligently designed and you can't create it, then what does that say about you? You know, and I couldn't help but laugh a little bit because I was like, well, you know,
it's with that, you know, with us being one of the created things, it doesn't necessarily mean we can do the creating.
Right.
It's such a, I mean, I've heard that argument too, but then I've also heard some people way smarter than me. I look at it like this. Say the universe is a floor that's perfectly flat. and then you have a ball and it's just sitting there. Then you have some, let's say a snowball. For that snowball to start getting bigger and start building into something else, there has to be something to create that, equal and opposite reaction. Something has to push it. There's no wind. There's nothing going on. Something had to push. So that's how I look at creation. Something got the ball rolling. I don't know who it was or how it was, but something got the ball rolling, or none of us would be here.
Right.
I mean, and just say a big bang. Something had to make a bang.
Right.
You can wrap my mind around the universe of starting the universe, in the expanding universe and all that. But something had to, and again, this is just being a human saying something had to start, but there has to be a point started happening as far as the ball rolling.
Right.
I don't know if we were just, somebody snapped their fingers and that's even, okay, let's just say.
Or even somebody saying, let there be light.
Yeah, let's just say, let there be light. Okay. Let's just say flipping a switch. There's all kinds of things behind this wall to make that light come on. So let's just say, quote unquote, God, the supreme being, so let there be light. There was something going on to create that light, whether it was a thought process, whether it was some cover to get the ball rolling, to get that light on. There had to be something creating it. Even though he's a creator, there was something like even creating something out of clay. You got to start adding on to it. There was something there that he created. That creating something out of nothing is a hard thing for me to grasp. So I figured there was something he was I don't know, or she.
There has to be. That's kind of the way my mind worked for a long time, because once we got old enough and my brothers and I, once we got old enough to kind of make our own decisions and stuff, and somewhat, especially thinking about things beyond our comprehension, it came to that, which was like, okay, I'm being taught this, especially in the school systems, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, we went to Holly Pond High School, and it's, for those people that haven't heard of it, which is pretty much everybody that in existence, that Holly Pond is so small, it's so tiny, but we're through the federal and state regulations, they have to teach on certain subjects, and so the theory of evolution was taught, but the theory of creation never was, because I guess, I don't know if the
guy led to the church. They just thought the church was
right. That was my thing. And but then looking at it from with some retrospect was like, well, now it seems like, because I kind of fish around with some of the younger people that I know that are still in school and stuff, and they're like, well, they just call it evolution now. And I'm like, I wonder if that's deliberate. And by I wonder, meaning it probably is, right? Is that like young minds, and which I know way more about, but young minds are so malleable, are so easily influenced and stuff, are based on their surroundings, the people that they're influenced by, the role models, good or bad, that if we're not careful, we can close them into forcing them to think a certain way because the government has regulated it that way. You know what I mean? It's like at some point the school systems have to cave a little bit because of funding, which to me is ridiculous. But at the same time, thankfully, and especially now, I look back, I had an anatomy teacher back at Holly Pond. His name was Coach Cornelius. He was fantastic. One of the best teachers I've ever had. But I remember, he, at the time, I didn't appreciate it really, other than we got to get out of learning a subject. But he came into class on Monday morning, and he was irate, and we couldn't figure out why. And he said, well, this week I'm supposed to teach on the theory of evolution. And he just sat there staring at the class. And I mean, it was like good 30 seconds of just dead silence. And he was like, but it's a theory and they expect me to teach it as fact. So I'm not going to. Moving on, And I started laughing. I was like, yes, Coach C's awesome, But looking back on it,
I kind of question everything, because, and it used to bother me that I questioned everything. But then I was like, okay, we were designed that way. And everybody does it. Our brain, that's the way it was in his image. There's some of that in there. And I know there's faith, and we can get in this whole big discussion of you just got to go on blind faith. But I don't think really that's what is. I just think there's you live by, try to be a good person. You know, you can doubt things, you can question things, but that's just how we're programmed. Like creating things, you know, I could tell my son, create me an app to make something. And even though it looks like magic to me, he knows what he's doing. So, I mean, the things they can do with light now, like create me a flower, they can make some holographic. I don't know if you've ever played with any VR stuff. My son has a that you put on, and and you feel like you're there. I mean, I've been chased by enough zombies. I run into the wall at least 3 times in my son's room. But yeah, I used to feel bad about questioning and doubting, and not only so much doubt, you know, because we always want 1 + 1 = 2. You know,
Right.
if this guy or girl or a being created this, where'd he come from? You know, that's just how our brain works. And I just think that's supposed to be there. That's just, I don't think he's using that to weed us out.
Right.
I just think that's just the way we're designed. And that's what makes us grow as a species instead of staying, you know, put.
Right. I heard somebody actually put it this way. They said that that if God was someone who we understood completely and entirely, then he wouldn't be a God worthy of worshiping. You know, and I was like, that makes sense, because you know, I believe in the God of the Bible, and the God of the Bible, I mean, I study it, and I study the word, and there's still so many questions and new things that come about.
Because he could be a bit nasty at times.
Right.
The Old Testament stuff, he could definitely be mad. Do some of the same things that I see some of those characteristics in us today. So that's why I know that, hey, he gives us a break.
Yeah.
Okay, just like
he is merciful, but he is also just, you know, but it was that same kind of thing where it's like, you know, I'm looking at it and I'm like, I mean, I'm being mentored by so many different people that have developed, I mean, with a cumulative amount of easily over 100 years worth of study in the scriptures, and they're still, and you know, and they don't have the answers, and they've been trained cumulatively over, you know, thousands of years, and so on and so forth, and yet there's still these questions, because he, you know, in my opinion, that God expects us to pursue him with that same curiosity. You know, he doesn't want to just say, this is it, here you go. And, you know, he wants us to pursue him.
Because I had a friend, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
We were talking, and a kid that I was counseling, or I used to counsel, he's grown up a lot more now, but he said, you know, if God would just come down and say, I'm God, and, you know, everybody would start believing. And I said, if you think that would be the end of it, there would be so much doubt. It would be no change whatsoever.
Right.
No.
I had a friend of mine at work that told me the same, and he was like, man, if I just have to see it to believe it. I said, you don't believe that? And he said, yes, I do. I said, okay. I saw David Copperfield make the Statue of Liberty disappear. I know it didn't happen. You know, I know it didn't happen. So what I see, I don't believe. And even if I do see it, I may not even still believe it. You know, it's like, if that's the mindset that you have is, well, I got to see it to believe it. Well, like you said, with the virtual reality stuff, with the way that we can manipulate light now and things like that, you can see whatever you want to. It doesn't mean it's actually there.
All night, but I might kind of wind it down here in a second.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Well, it's been a good, interesting, very diverse
I appreciate
discussion.
It's been super fun.
I definitely want to get back with you about maybe here not too long in the future and talk about maybe some more current things and just hash some of the stuff out. But I do appreciate you being online. I definitely would like to at some point be able to sit down in person. Obviously, that may not ever happen again.
And some training.
Yes, yeah. But I would love to be able to do that, because it's so easy for people, like we've said before, it's so easy for people to be able to hide behind Facebook or hide behind Twitter and stuff like that. And you know, it's like, well, I'm going to post my opinion, and anybody that disagrees with me, I'm going to delete them, or anybody that disagrees with me, I'm going to battle them. But if you were talking to that person face to face, you know, you might disagree and you would be okay with that. You know, you'd be okay. Well, look, you know, we're just different people, and we can still love each other and be not just friendly and cordial, but we can still be friends. And that was sort of my whole point of doing this, is I wanted to show other people and encourage other people that, you know, people say the two things that you shouldn't talk about are politics and religion, because that's taboo or whatever. But those two things, people don't like talking about them because they're so important. And those are the things we should be discussing, those things.
Right. You should be talking as your perspective. I mean, you're talking in terms of your perspective, and you gain more perspective when you hear somebody else's perspective.
Right.
So I think it's completely a good idea.
Yeah. So, man, I do appreciate it. I definitely want to get together sometime. If nothing else, we'll go eat, and we'll have to get face shields and masks and goggles and everything else.
I do the over at the coffee house there in Coleman. There's a couple. I mean, some mentions there many times. So when it starts picking back up, we'll have to do that sometime.
Sounds good. Well, David, I appreciate you being on here. I appreciate you talking.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all for anybody that's listening or watching, and we hope to see you again sometime soon.